community to hold a webinar around questions and around this topic. But I think it's enough from my side to speak so many many things. So just now, let me finish the poll. Thanks for the answers. And now the floor is open for you, Helen. Really, I appreciate that you are here. Please introduce you a bit yourself and the journey, how you got, for example, last year to publish this book.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Thomas, for inviting me. And I'm thrilled to be able to speak to your whole community, because for me, it is very important to have everybody talking about this topic. So I trained as a social worker in 1982, and I worked with families while I was working as a social worker until about 94, 95. And then I moved into work in schools, but still doing sort of social work things. And even back in the 1980s, we were meeting parents who were expressing fear of their children and not really understanding what was going on. This was something that felt very extraordinary, and we didn't know how to support families really. And so although we maybe didn't hear it very much, it was something that stayed in our minds. And then more and more, when I was working in schools, parents who said, I can't get my child to school. They won't come to school. What am I supposed to do? And thinking again, this is more than just teenagers being awkward. This is more, it's not a normal teenage behavior. So really starting to think, so this is something new, what is going on here? And in 2004, I had a chance to do some study. And I did a small piece of research looking at how easy it was for parents to find help if they were being abused by their children, and found that there was very little information, very little research, very few agencies who could help or who understood. So when parents would ask for help, they would be sent away, or people would say, it's your fault, you're not parenting properly, you're not parenting hard enough, set more boundaries, be more consistent. So parents felt very discouraged and very abandoned. And then I started to think, this is a real problem. I must do more about this. And eventually in 2011, I set up my website, Holes in the Wall, which is a resource hub and a knowledge hub, and reaches across the world. And I have, over the years, I've added more pages to it. So I have a blog on the front page, and then it has links to journal articles, books, anything that I can find. I have a page for audio links or video links if people want to use things for training. There's a page for training and events where people can find out where to get more awareness or understanding. So I became focused on my website and using that as a way to bring greater awareness of this issue. Mm-hmm. And I started speaking at conferences and realized that although there were still 3 or 4 books maybe that I could find in anywhere about child to parent violence, there was very little written, and I wanted to write a book for practitioners. And so that has taken me, it took about 5 years from thinking about it. So it took me about a year to write altogether, but I was thinking about it for a very long time. So I was really pleased last year to be able to publish it. This is the book. And it is really, it takes somebody through an understanding of what child to parent violence feels like, what it might look like. It challenges some of our understandings about why this comes about or who is affected. So I talk about what is it, just who is to blame? Why do we want to blame somebody? And I talk about parents who are very demanding and keep coming back to us and asking for more and more help, and we maybe think that they're being very difficult, but actually they're worried about their child, and we must listen to parents who are experts in their child often. And I talk about different ways of understanding this. Should we understand this as like domestic violence, or is it like criminal behaviour? And then I offer some guidance for how to assess what's going on, what kinds of practice, and other things to think about how do we understand power within families. So it's not do this, now do this, now do this, now do this, but it's to help practitioners think about how they're working with families and to develop their own practice. So I should say I don't work directly with families anymore. My time now is spent speaking at events, doing some more writing. So yeah, I've been a social worker since 1980. It's time that I hand it over to somebody else.
But that's a very good opportunity for us now, because as you may know, that Child Protection Hub is mostly for child care professionals like social workers, as you mentioned. Coming back to this, that how, as a social worker, how do you recognize the signs of it's really a child to parent abuse and not the way of word or any other kind of psychological issue?
It's interesting, because I think we have been very slow to recognize it, and the tendency is to think, oh, this is poor parenting. So a parent comes and asks for help, and the assumption from social workers is often, we need to teach you parenting skills, basic parenting skills. But actually, this is something different. And by the time parents come for help, they might have been experiencing trouble for many years. And so the situation is very extreme, perhaps. They may be in real danger, or they may be very frightened. But parents find it hard to ask for help, because maybe it's happened for so long, it just feels normal. And parents themselves will struggle to understand when normal, difficult behavior became abusive. Or they might feel that everyone will blame them. And so they already feel bad. They already feel ashamed that their child is doing this to them. They don't want to hear everybody else saying, it's your fault. It's your fault. When they're with me, they're lovely. You just need to do this. And also parents have fear of the authorities. So they are frightened that their child will be taken away, or that they will be given a criminal record, or that the child will have a criminal record and that will spoil their chances in life. So parents are afraid to ask for help, and they don't know where to go. So it's hard for us to see it at all. But I think
what
the
can you do?
signs are often there. Sorry?
Sorry, Ellen, just to interrupt, but what did you do in this way? So as a social worker, how you can help the parents to ask for help or reach you?
If parents need to feel confident that we understand the issue. And I think if as practitioners, if we get an understanding, then we can know better how to respond to parents. And I think the key for me is that we are curious and we take away our assumptions. Everything in life tells us that parents are in charge and that children should do as they're told. And this turns this upside down, and it challenges the way we think about the world. And so sometimes it is hard to remember and to understand that this is a real thing. But if we, as practitioners, are understanding it, we can better respond. So we can really listen. We can listen with respect and hear what parents are saying, and not just say, you need to go on a parenting course. We can say, tell me a bit more about that. Are you afraid of him? Tell me what he actually does. When he's shouting, what does he say? So if we are curious and we we are open in our minds to thinking maybe this is a possibility. So if a parent says, my child will not go to school, maybe we say, tell me what that's like in the morning. What happens? What do you do? Tell me more about that. Why is it frightening you? So we need to be curious, and we need to ask those questions.
Based on your experience, what age of children does the abuse happens mostly?
Yeah,
Thanks for the question on the chat.
Yeah, this is a really interesting question, and it seems like there are maybe two situations. So there are some children where it will have always been a problem. So there will be some children who, perhaps because they have been born with a particular condition, or because they have experienced trauma or loss very early on. So children who have been neglected or abused as babies and perhaps have been removed into the care system, or children who have a neurological condition, or children who have a disability. They may express their anxiety, their fear, their trauma through their behavior from very early on. And maybe as young as 5 or 6, 4 even, parents will start to say, this is quite frightening. I don't know what to do. This is not just a toddler tantrum. This is something very, very big, rage rather than fear. And that will be a very long-term thing. But there are other children who, perhaps as they become teenagers, we know being a teenager is a hard thing. You have all your hormones, you have your brain doing strange stuff, you're changing school, perhaps suddenly you have to do more on your own, you want to do risky things, you don't have the thinking to make good decisions developed properly yet. And perhaps at this time also, other things are going on in your family. Perhaps there's a divorce, or perhaps there's domestic violence, or perhaps someone dies that's close to you. Perhaps it's very scary at your new school. And suddenly all these things together become too much. And again, the child uses their behavior to communicate their distress or their fear or their anxiety. So for some children, it will be always there, but gets worse because the child gets bigger, the child gets heavier, the parent is more exhausted. But for other children, maybe it will happen later. It will start later because of difficulties, things that have happened around them. And it's more of a sudden thing that starts then. Does that answer the question?
For me, it does, but yeah, for Vesna as well.
Yeah.
Regards this to recognize that which age or which situation can it happen, what can mislead us? So what are other usually typical behavior which is may misleading the social workers or the psychologist to recognize that it's like a child to parent abuse?
I think the question that we would ask parents is, are you frightened? And we all expect teenagers to be awkward, to slam doors, to not want to talk to us, to be difficult. But we don't expect to be frightened of our children. And when parents are frightened of their children, and when they start to change how they live to avoid conflict, so perhaps a parent never goes in one room in their house. Or perhaps a parent will go out of the front door round and then back in the back door because they want to avoid a child who's sitting in one room. Or perhaps a parent spends the evenings in their bedroom because they can't watch the television downstairs. So if a parent is changing their behavior because they're afraid of their child, I think we're then talking about violence and abuse and not just the teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. If anybody have a question regards where we are now, really feel free to ask in the chat forum. Meanwhile, my next question would be that, okay, so we know that the main question is that if the parents are frightened, so if they have some fears regards the child, but what can we do in this situation? How we can treat or help them?
Yeah, yeah. So what we've learned when we listen to families, what we learn is that families want to stay together. They feel generally, not always, but generally, families are committed to caring for their children. They want things to be better. They don't want us to take their children away or to punish them or to find somewhere else. They want to make the situation better so they can live together happily and safely. And so we are looking to help parents to restore their authority within that relationship and to find a different way of relating, but to understand also what is happening for that young person. We need, there is a point of view that we cannot change somebody else's behavior. We can only change our own behavior. But if I change the way that I respond to you when you are angry, if I respond in a different way, then you will also change your behavior in the end, because what you expected doesn't happen. So we teach parents to respond in a different way. They change their behavior, and that helps the young person to respond in a different way. We teach young people to take responsibility for their own actions and to understand that what they're doing is wrong. But we also need to understand what is happening for that young person. What are they afraid of? What are they, perhaps they're being told that this is okay. There are many situations where this could be happening. And so we need to understand each situation. And
Can I ask some example based on your background? So you mentioned some situations, but can you give us some more practical ways what it happens?
Of course. So we think about 50% of the time, it looks like, if you look at situations, maybe 50% of the time, there has been difficulty in the family and the parents have split up. So maybe there was violence between the couple. And maybe now, let's say the father, maybe the father is living somewhere else, but maybe still in contact with the children. So here we see often, not always, not all children who have experienced this, maybe a quarter of children with that experience will go on to be violent at some level. But for those children, it might be that the father is still saying to them when they see him, go home, say this to your mother, do this to your mother. And the father is coaching and manipulating and continues to abuse the mother through the children. It might be that the child has learnt, this is how you treat women. This is how you treat my mother. This is what she deserves because of what they have experienced. It might be that the child is now at home with their mother, and perhaps the mother is very depressed because of all that's happened, because of the abuse she's suffered, and the child feels helpless because no one is taking charge in the home. But it's not a cause. The fact that there was domestic violence and the parents separated is not a cause, but it makes the family vulnerable. So one example I would use would be a young woman who was with her parents, and there was a lot of violence, and she and mum escaped the violence and went to live somewhere else with her daughter in a flat. And mum and daughter, to start with, they were doing well. They'd coped with separating. They had a new life. But mum became very depressed, and so the daughter stopped going to school because she was worried about her mum. And because mum was depressed, mum wasn't going to work, so then there was worry about money. And so the daughter was worrying all the time, how can I help my mum? What can I do? And where she lived, she met some people and they said, we can help you, do some work for us, deliver these drugs for us, and we will pay you. And then you can help your mum like that. So now the daughter is involved in she's being exploited. Mm-hmm. And now she realizes very quickly, she's now very afraid of what she's done. She realizes this was not a good choice, but because the gang is very violent and very controlling, she knows now she can't get out. She can't tell her mum what she's done because she's ashamed, because she's threatened. And so she can't talk, so she becomes violent and abusive at home because she's frightened of what will happen and because mum doesn't understand, mum wants to stop her going out. So it's often a very complicated situation with many, many different things going on for a young person. That's quite a complex problem, many different elements. It might be a child has autism and finds the day at school very stressful because there are so many changes, lights, lots of noise, so many demands. The teachers don't understand. Maybe at school they're okay, but they come home and they explode. People talk about shaking up a Coke bottle. Do you know that picture? So that you take a Coke bottle to school and someone bumps into you and you shake the Coke bottle once. And you go to the next classroom and the teacher shouts at you and you shake the Coke bottle again. And at lunchtime, you have the dinner is not what you like, you shake it again. And all through the day, the Coke bottle is being shaken and shaken and shaken. You come home and mum takes the lid off the Coke bottle and the Coke goes everywhere. So for that child, they come home and mum says, come in, how was your day? Pat, bang. And mum has the verbal abuse, the shouting, the screaming, the throwing things, the violence. So there could be many different sorts of reasons why a child might be violent and abusive. And it will feel different for a different family. It might feel like something that we should just understand and be caring about, perhaps, for some children. And other children, we might feel more angry. But in each of those situations, we think, what is this child trying to say? Why do they need to shout so loudly for us to hear? I think that is a helpful way of understanding what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. It's a good point to ask the participants on the webinar that if you have any kind of situation or case in your practice, but would be nice to ask me a bit clarification if it's that case or not, please feel free to ask now. Yeah. Because it even can be interesting to share some examples, maybe from Southeastern Europe as well.
Yeah. And we find when we ask practitioners, is this going on? Nearly everybody puts up their hand. So even though we don't talk about it, and we maybe use other words to describe what's happening, when people say, oh, maybe that family, then everybody will say, yes, it is in my work. Maybe as many as 30% of the families will be experiencing something, and not always really extreme. Sometimes early on there is more, it's easier to change things. Some parents will be very frightened of what's going on.
We have a question.
Yeah.
Let me unmute.
Hello.
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 Sorry, Tato, I have seen you. Hello, yeah, we can hear you now.
Hello.
Hello. Hello, Tato.
Yes, how are you?
How are you?
I'm good.
It looks sunny where you are.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
So what's your question?
Oh, my question is, how can you tell when a child is being abused, and then the child find it very not very easy to tell mostly, but you just notice the signs, or you are being curious that the child is being abused, but the
Oh dear.
We lost you.
How do you deal with that?
So I missed a little bit of your question. Perhaps you can you type your question?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I think
Okay.
there will be, we do think that many children who are being abusive will have been abused themselves, and that is another link, that maybe that they have experienced direct abuse, or perhaps they have lived in a household where other people have been abused. Sometimes it is a revenge thing, but often they are not abusing the person who was abusive to them. They might be abusing their parent who perhaps didn't look after them, didn't protect them, or perhaps they are now in a new family, having been adopted, and they will be abusive to their new family because the way they make relationships is so damaged. But I'm waiting to see your question.
Me too. Just answer this question. We already started to explain for us that how this kind of situation can be dealt, and I really get to the point that the parents have to change their way, their how they treat the child and what they do on a daily basis. I think it's and the case you mentioned are really in a situation where usually there is no family behind. I mean that usually it's a single mother, as you mentioned, or different cases. So inside the family, how they can really work with such situation?
Yeah. Well, it is often a single parent, because so much will be where a family has separated. But we know that this happens in families with two parents as well. And that if there are two parents, both may be affected, or maybe one more than the other. And we are asking, and it may be that those parents have other children who are fine. And so it's not necessarily about something wrong with the way they're being a parent. It's just this connection with this particular child because of what's going on for them. Now I've forgotten the question.
So what are the main methods how to help in such situation? Because one way is the interaction with the parents, but
one of the things that is important is to help parents find support. So we help them to identify someone that they can call on in an emergency, or a group of friends that respect them and will listen to them, and they can go to if they need some strength themselves, because it's something that you need a lot of help with, to help you feel strong to carry on. What we ask parents to do is very hard, and sometimes when they start to change their behavior, the situation may get worse to start with. So parents need to have a lot of support, and as a practitioner we can be supportive, but we're not there all the time, and we're maybe only there for a short period. So parents need to have friends or family around them, or to know that I can, in a crisis, I can phone up this person and they will come and help. So yes, it's important for people to have that support network. Here in England, the adoption community have developed a lot of support online. Whether on Facebook or on Twitter, they talk to each other a lot online, and all the time are checking in. How are you today? What's gone on? Oh, I've had a terrible day. This has gone on. Be strong. We understand. We're with you. So just mutual support and mutual checking in. And that's been really important for people here.
Mm-hmm. In the meantime, we have another question. Let me unmute Maida. I'm not asking you to share the video because maybe that will break the voice, but no, you are unmuted. Maida, can you hear us?
Yes, do you hear me?
Yep,
Yeah,
we can.
Okay, hello everyone.
hello.
Yes, I'm from Croatia, and I'm special teacher and volunteer, Red Cross,
Mhm.
and now I learning about academy childhood and um, with the social worker and the teacher.
Yeah.
And I'm so exciting, really, that I love learning. My English is not very good.
English.
Never mind. But
I
what is
can
your
understand. I can understand more, but
Maida?
I have problem with conversation.
Maida, never mind. What is your question, please?
My question. I'm not prepared. Question. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
Eh,
So inside we had a question on the chat that based on your experience, are children who are perpetrators of abuse victims or have been victims to abuse themselves?
Yeah. So sometimes that will be the case, and but we know that not all children who have been a victim will go on to use harmful behaviour, and we try to not talk about victim and perpetrator, because we say that if we label a child, that changes the way we think about them, and we want to see this more as something that's gone wrong in the relationship that we can heal, and that this child can go on to have a normal life if we can help them. We don't want them to be labeled as a perpetrator, because that may stay with them forever. But we do know that some children, if they don't get help, may go on to use abusive behavior to their partners, or later on in life, maybe continue with their parents as well. And we need to understand that's what we're seeing. We're talking about working with young children, maybe up to 18 or 20, 25, but that's some young people, some adults go on to continue abusing their parents into old age. This is something which carries on across the lifespan. It doesn't stop. But not all children who use violence have been abused themselves. So it's not a cause, but it makes children vulnerable. And it maybe if they can't express their feelings in other ways, then they start to use their behavior to tell us what's going on for them.
Thank you, and thanks for the question, Colette. In the meantime, we have another question. What is your opinion on the educational projects for young people in the difficult life situations? The main idea is that relocation in isolated rural areas of a different country is going to benefit them by interrupting their everyday routines. So after a few months, things get better.
Yeah. I know that these sorts of programs take place around the world in lots of different communities. And sometimes I know that parents need a break, that the situation has got so bad that for everybody's safety, the child needs to be removed. But for me, this is not just about the child's behavior and about them being naughty and understanding things. This is about the relationship. And so we need to support the young person to understand what is wrong or not right about their behavior, and we need to help them to learn ways to deal with their emotions. We need to help the parent to understand if there is a different way of relating to their child which will support them better. So is there a better way of communicating it because of their needs? Is there a different way of asking them to do things because of their needs? Is there a different way of helping them to calm down? But we also need to help them to understand each other better. We also need to work with siblings. Maybe siblings may also, brothers and sisters may also be very frightened, they may be in danger as well. So although it can be good to have a break, for everyone to have a breather, to have respite, but we also understand that this is we have to heal the relationship. And so we see this as developing a healthy relationship for the future, restoring that relationship. So I think some of those programs can be good for some situations, but they are not the answer to this problem.
Thank you. Now we have two questions, and I think it was very much connected with this, like times a child became aggressive and does not relate well with other children. So I think we catch many parts of it. Tatu, if it still was not an answer that we already discussed, please let us know. But in the meantime, let me ask, what is the UK practice in such cases? So we are already started to discuss about treatment to helping the parents, helping the family, but what other parties are involved? That's I think it can be very interesting for us in these European countries as well. That how do you involve like police, health worker, or different parties? So what's happening?
Yeah, so we have to remember that really it's only the last 10 years that there has been very much help from anywhere. And the help for families and the understanding is not in one agency. And so if you live in one place, you may get help from, you may have help from the police. If you live somewhere else, you may go somewhere else for help. But we're starting to see greater understanding across all agencies. And we believe that everybody needs to understand what is going on, because everybody has a responsibility. And a parent may go for help to many different places. So a parent may go to their doctor or to the hospital, or they may go to a domestic violence charity if they are already experiencing domestic violence. They may call the police if the child has a knife, or if they have done a lot of damage. At school, the school may be involved because the behaviour is bad at home as well. Or often here we have support workers in schools, parent support workers, so a parent might feel comfortable to ask for help at school. Social workers as well, but there's no law and there is not very much guidance. We have one piece of guidance which was drawn up in 2015 and published, which sets out guidance for all those organisations, but it is still very basic and not everybody has read it. So we now try and get that, we're trying to update that and to get more people to read it. So, but because there are, as I explained, there may be so many different things. There may be drugs, there may be mental health, there may be domestic violence. We need all agencies to come together to share their expertise. So a family may need help from a team of people in order to best support the child. And we start to see that more and more now. So we start to see a family may go to the police, but then their situation will be discussed at a meeting where there are also social workers, domestic abuse workers, and people will listen to the situation and decide what is the best way of helping. And many projects are run by the domestic abuse charity, the youth offending team, and perhaps the local social workers. They come together to work to support a family together. So we have, sometimes people are working just one-to-one with a family. Sometimes you can go on a program which is maybe 10 weeks, maybe 20 weeks, and then you will have a little bit of help before and after. So there are many different ways. There's not one way of working. There are many different ways, but it depends where you live in the country. And in some places still, there may be no one who is a specialist, and then it is very hard for families.
Okay, thank you. You already mentioned some interesting profession, I would say, or charities. I will try to look at it more and may share some news on child hub as well, because it's even a good practice for us to see what's happening in UK. My last question maybe regards that we already speak about how to help through the family.
Yeah.
Did you had already a case where you directly involved the child? What happened in this case?
So, not for me personally, but many of the projects work with, they would have what we call a parallel program. So they would come together and they would have an introduction with the whole family together, maybe 6, 8, 10 families. And then the parents will go into one room and the young people will go into another room, and they will work on similar things. And then they will maybe come together at the end, or that might happen for 10, 12, 20 weeks. So that they will look at similar things and they will learn what to think about, why people are being violent, what that means, what are better ways to handle a situation, how could you help that person to respond in a different way. And working with the young people, we learn that it is frightening for them as well, that this is not, it's not a good situation for the young person to be in. It's not normal for the young person to have so much authority in the home. And it can be scary for them to have such overwhelming emotions and to feel out of control. So a child who has autism perhaps may feel very out of control and very scared themselves. A child who is being asked to play a role in the family, which is not appropriate in terms of making decisions, taking charge, being quite strict, that may feel very wrong to them, but they may feel they have no choice. A child who is out on the streets and is exploited may feel very frightened, and there may be threats of what will happen to them. So we know it's not good for the young person, it's quite frightening for them. And so when they start to receive support, they feel much they feel good. It is happier for them as well. They want to be in a place where they are in a secure family and where the proper way of being as a family is restored. So yeah, it's when we understand it like that, these are not, it's not about wild children who want to rule the world and who are very aggressive and very demanding. And sure, there are kids like that, but often we're seeing children who want to have a normal family life, but something has gone wrong and they can't make it happen. They need us to, they need the adults to take charge again and make it happen for them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just another question came to my mind that touching the worst case, let's say, have you already heard a situation where maybe the child was taken away from the family as they was not able to deal with this situation?
Yeah, we do see, well, sometimes a family will make their own arrangements. So a child may go and live with grandma or with an uncle and aunt, or even a child may go and live with their boyfriend or their girlfriend because it is just too much. Sometimes parents may say, I cannot look after this child anymore, please take them, and the local authority, the government will take the child into care. But that is less often. With teenagers perhaps a little bit more, but they would work to bring the child back into the home. So that is one way that we have of really intensive work with the child and with the family to enable the child to return home. It does happen like that. Children might go and live somewhere else. And I know in some countries that is more standard, that you would work with a family by taking the child away into a hospital setting or a therapeutic community and working like that. So what the response looks like will be different in different countries. I know that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Regards, what should we do to make these cases less happening around the world.
Yeah.
So it's a broad topic. So already making attention or calling the attention of people, like today with this webinar, I think it's one step. But what do you foresee? What else should we do?
Yeah, I suppose if we look at what is going on, if we look at the different situations, we can start to say many of these situations we could help, we could put in help much earlier on. So we know that many adoptive families find the situation very difficult, but we don't put enough support for adoptive families right from the start. We should be saying to families, if you adopt this child, there may be a lot of difficulties. We will help you now to prepare for those, to understand what's going on. Not waiting 10 years till it's really bad. We know that when families split up, when there is domestic abuse, there are already programs that we can do. We can work with the mother and the children to help them understand the situation, to help them move on. But there are not enough of those programs. We could have more of those programs. We know that children who have autism understand the world and relate to the world in a different way, and experience stress in a different way. We should be looking to support parents earlier on, to say we need to maybe move away from saying this child needs to fit in, they need to behave like this. We need to say to the parents, we can help you to understand your child better and to give your child what they need in a different way. They have different needs to this child. If you respond in this way, you can help the child to keep calm. So at the moment in Britain, we have a big problem with knife crime and with drugs. And many people will say that is because the government has cut spending on youth work, the government's cut spending on the police. There's not so much money for that. And if we had more money for youth work, more money for the police, we could stop many of those things. So some of it is political, about where the money goes and what help there is. And we need to be prepared to accept the consequences. If we vote for people who believe in a small state and in cutting funding, we must expect that things will go wrong. So if we want to support families, then that needs more funding, more money for services right from very early on to support young people in schools, in youth clubs, to develop positive relationships and to build that strength, which means they don't then become involved in bad things.
Okay,
yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
We still have 5 minutes back. So dear participants, if you have any question left back in your mind, no, it's still time to ask for it.
Yeah, can I say one other thing? And that is that when a family asks for help, I think the most important thing first is to say, are you safe? And because we know that it may be, by the time a parent asks for help, it may be very bad. And we need to check that the family is safe. Or do we need to help them make a plan to keep them safe? If the child is using a knife, what do they need to do? Do they need to lock up all their knives? Do they need to get rid of things from the house to keep safe? Who do they need to involve? So that has to be the first question. Are you safe? How can we help you to be safe? What will happen if you do this? Will that make it better or worse? And to understand that.
Wow. That sounds a very good advice. For me, that was I would say almost the perfect closing, because this question sounds very, very strong. Yeah. Did you feel safe yourself?
Yeah. Can I say again how exciting it is for me to take part in this? I'm so glad that there is so much interest. And I do hope that you'll be able to see in all your different countries that the situation can, you can build that awareness and build those services to support families. So that'd be great.
Thank you. I already launched the evaluation poll questions,
yeah.
So please answer it and give as part of it some feedback for us. Yeah. Helen, we really appreciate your time and for your preparation for this webinar and starting to discuss with us those topics. Feel free anytime to share any best practice from your practice. We are happy to promote it on Child Hub.
Thank you very much.
And we really appreciate your time being here.
And people are very welcome to read my website and always to make comments or to tell me about things or to write a piece for the website. That's always great. So please do tell people about my website as well, about Holes in the Wall.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all.
Okay.
Have a nice day. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Bye-bye.